Welcome to Two Mothers, One Aché, a grief dialogue. I'm Dionne.
And I'm Yvette. We're mothers, friends, and sisters in grief.
I lost my daughter, Siwe, at 15 years old.
And I lost my son, Dasan, at 26.
This podcast is our space to talk about grief, how it shapes us, how it lingers, and how love carries us through. Welcome to the conversation.
And now for part 2 of Grief and Addiction with our very special guest, Jill Mackey.
We get to decide if that changes our relationship with the person who passes away. We get to decide who even hears the information, right? We're choosing to share the information here today for the greater good, right? But we get to decide how much power it has. A big piece is reclaiming our power and radical ownership over our own grief story.
Wow. Wow.
You know, part of what I experienced when I received the information about Dasan's overdose, I I'll share a really brief story. I actually started seeing Jill when Dasan had his when he was abusing alcohol, and I was about to leave to move to LA, and I didn't know what to do, and I was in a panic state, and didn't want to leave him in that way. And so I started seeing Jill, and because I come from a family of addicts, I wanted different for my children. And it was even a prayer to God, like, deliver me healthy children, and I will give them a different life. I really believed that the addiction, the genetics of addiction, the inheritance of addiction would not affect my children because I had worked so hard to get through it myself, and that I can do better and teach them better.
Girl.
And then, one of the things that when I was in the other crisis, 6 months after his transition, and I received this news, and I brought it to Jill, and I shared it with her, and I don't know, that probably took weeks of sitting sessions for Jill to get to a point with me where she said something that, I don't know, I snapped out of it is not the right terminology, but it's what comes to my head. And she said it with so much love, and she said it with so much empathy, and she came in, but it was hard love, right? It was like tough love for me. And she said, given what you know about addiction, what would Dasan's life had been like? What would your life be like? What would Eva's life be like had he not died when he died, and would have continued living in addiction?
Whew.
And I had to come to terms with that. And honestly, it's what allowed me to give God the glory to have spared Dasan a slow death of addiction. And I'm going to say this with my full open heart. And some people might disagree, and that's okay, because until you've walked a half a step in my shoes, honestly, God showed Dasan grace and mercy by taking his young life, taking him at a young point, rather than him being subjected to the corruption, of addiction.
Wow. Thank you for that. Thank you. The way I receive things, to our listeners at home, I hope you bookmark this and come back to it, because I think it's going to be a lot to process in this one episode. So I invite you, as I will listen to it again, that you should listen to it again. Because even the question, I'm such a visual listener and learner, that question, as you said it, felt like it was cold water thrown on me. It was like, oh, okay. And there's pictures flowing through my mind of seeing my uncle. Evie and I are both New Yorkers, Jill. And I mentioned heroin because the uncle I'm thinking of, Uncle Larry, was a heroin addict. And just growing up in New York and walking down the street and passing the Harlem State Office building. And people are now used to seeing folks nodding again because this opioid addiction, this crisis is here again. It's not new. And seeing somebody and walking by and like looking at them and they're like, oh, look at that. I'm like, yeah, that's my uncle. That's literally my uncle. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, that's my uncle. And like, I just keep going. Like, I'm not going to stop. Like, what am I going to do? He's on his journey. I'm in my journey. And even as I'm speaking about it now, and he's been dead and gone, and then it became a methadone addict, right? You get off heroin, then you're on methadone. And then we were all really proud that when he passed, he was off all substances, right? And another cousin, Johnny, and the swelling. Do you remember this, Evie? The swelling of the hand
Yeah.
and how and I never understood that. And I still don't, but when you see it, and this was a cousin, Johnny. So you said all through the family and you'd see it and you're like, what is that? And just not knowing what that was, being a child and seeing it with a cousin, with an uncle, and they're in the hospital again. And then the girlfriend, and I don't know where he is, and listening to the conversations and like, what? And then growing up. And so this is what I feel like they're delayed or hidden truths. And then you learn things. And it was like, Johnny was my favorite cousin. We would always play together. And what do you mean that maybe he would have lived if he wasn't drinking? What do you like? It's, and then there's this part of me and growing up feeling like, oh, you said this earlier, but like it was his fault. So he didn't love me enough. I wasn't,
I wasn't enough. I wasn't enough.
It
I
wasn't
wasn't
enough.
enough to have them, I didn't love them enough. I wasn't enough. Like because the substance abuse or the need to, for this, the substance, it
Yeah.
overshadowed, it overpowered the love, the relationship. It really, again, just
And
came in, and it's a bulldozer.
yeah, and we'll have to figure out another episode because as I'm reflecting on this with you for these hidden truths, and that's just saying that I'm not enough. I'm not enough for this person to change their behavior. And even though we know that's not true, that's never what it is, that the brain knows that, but in the body, I feel like that's showed up in my other relationships. It's showed up in intimate relationships and the choices that people make and the judgment that I have on myself. And Jill, we're going to go back to you with the questions, but in that story, in my reflection and Yvette's reflections, like grief tied to addiction, there's just so many emotions. It's all too much. The love, the anger, the guilt, and even relief. Like even relief. How do all these conflicting emotions coexist? And why do they leave people? I am people. Why do they leave people feeling so isolated?
Yeah, I have so many thoughts on what you just said, right? So addiction's cunning and baffling and insidious, number one, right? So it's so normal that here we are thinking like, why am I not enough, right? Meanwhile, we're standing in front of like King Kong. It's like we're so outmatched by addiction. Like we as lay people standing here, it's like, unless we're actively in addiction, it's like we can't even possibly imagine how strong a craving or an urge or a desire is when they're in it. It's like their living skills have been reduced to the animal level, right? The NA text talks about this. Living skills are reduced to the animal level and their capacity to feel human was lost, right? So we're not even interacting with a family member anymore when they're in it, right? So when they're in it, right, it might be like 10% drugs and alcohol, 90% Jill, 20% drugs and alcohol, 80% Jill, right? And as the time passes, it becomes more drugs and alcohol and less the person. And so then we're talking to the disease of the substance at that point in time because the disease progresses, right? So to the point of just the pain of watching that and dealing with that, we get broken down systematically over time, right? But in terms of the isolation, right, it's it's so hard to share it. It's hard to even talk about grief, right? We don't necessarily want to talk about it, or we do, but we don't know what to say, right? I'm sure many of you have heard platitudes, right? Like, well, at least, or, if only, or, rest in peace. And, I'm sure they meant well. It was a disease, right? Like, you're not allowed to be upset. So for those of us who are upset about, right? Because we vacillate, right? So our inner kids are allowed to be upset and understand that it's a disease at the same time, right? We can understand it's a disease and at the same time be like, yeah, they should have been able to stop. Why couldn't they? And then our other side's like, well, it's a disease. We get it, right? And then the relief after you've dealt with this for 15 years, it's like, yeah, there is some level of relief that maybe they passed away, or they're hopefully in some other life or world where they're happier, because they're dragging me through the mud here and they're dragging themselves through the mud, and thinking your family member or your kid is going to die every single day from this, right? It's like, that is a fate worse than death. Honestly, the anxiety that comes from, they're taking years off of your life when we're worried about, and it's okay to feel like, it's over. It's over for both of us.
There was one word that you used that I was listening and half in my own world with that. It was like understand. Because that word understand I feel like it's like overused like love. Because what do we really understand? Like, there's so many words with air quotes. Like, what do we know? What do we understand? And then in this context of what we know, what we understand, and our relief and our emotions, what is self-forgiveness? What does it look like in this context of addiction related loss?
Yeah. Yeah. So I think some of that is letting go of the blame. That's a big piece. Letting go of blaming them, letting go of blaming ourselves, letting go of blaming our parents or our partners or whoever. That doesn't mean necessarily forgetting, right? Because our inner kids need to know that too, that the truth is really important and what happened is important, but letting go of the blame and forgiving is essential for us to live our own life, right? Unless we want to stand next to their urn or their grave for our whole entire life, we have to learn how to move forward in some way, shape, or form. That doesn't mean we're abandoning them. It doesn't mean we're leaving them behind. No one is truly dead and gone until they're forgotten, right? So we're integrating them into us and into ourself, and experiencing all of the feelings as dialectical, right? So die is two, right? Lectical, competing thoughts and feelings, and allowing ourselves to be confused, honoring that we're doing our best, and the acceptance really of the generational nature of addiction, that there's only so much that we can do, right? When we have an entire family history of drugs, degradation, trauma, pain, all these sorts of things, right? We're one generation and we think we're going to stop this entire bus from hitting the rest of our family, right? It's like giving ourselves some grace and compassion, like, only one person, right? It's only our first go around here trying to manage and even make sure that we're not addicts and alcoholics, or that we're in recovery or what have you, right? So just loving ourselves through the process. We've already been through enough, right? We don't need to lose what we still have to what we lost already, and not forgiving ourselves is the worst thing we can do for ourselves, right? We're already in the pain and the grief already.
Yeah, I to your point, Jill, I do not believe in double punishment.
Yes, double jeopardy, right?
Double jeopardy,
We're in the
right? Like,
survivor's guilt already. Right.
punishing more than once for for wrongdoing. Like, I never believe in that. And I got to tell you that forgiving myself for Dasan was probably the greatest exercise in my healing.
Yeah.
Because not only did I heal myself, but I healed, like you said, the generational pain. Because I was able to forgive my mother for not being able to love me the way that I needed to be loved. I was able to forgive my sister, who was 8 years older than me, who was, addicted to heroin. I was able to pave a way for Eva to not have to live in the residuals, or the residuals of
The
that,
shrapnel.
yes, of the trauma. And I think that was the best way that I can set her up for a brighter future, for a future outside of the trauma of addiction and blame and guilt. It was an exercise though. Like it didn't come overnight. I had to do a lot of deep digging. But
Yeah.
it came, and it for me, it came through my spirituality, through my faith, through my surrendering to a higher being and to a higher energy.
Girl, the stories and the pictures going through my head. I wish I were an artist like my son is to give you these visuals. But as I'm listening to you and to both of you, to Jill and Evie, and forgiving yourself and understanding and talking to it, what I think, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this before we go into the next questions, but what Evie and I are doing, as I was like, yeah, my father was an alcoholic, my son's father, my son's grandfather, my son he likes to drink, he's dry at the moment, but this is so much in the blood and in the family. So what I see that Evie and I are doing, now mine, some past, some current, we're talking about it. Like I am clear with my niece, with my younger son, just with people when there's like, how are things going? What you said, you gave an example, Joe, which was absolutely my truth. We're going to a wedding. It's me and my son. I show up, and anywhere I show up, and if my son's supposed to be come with me, people look at me and go, "Well, where's your son?" And I'm like, "Hi, my name is Dionne. I'm Dionne. I am here. Anyone that is not here with me, I do not know where they are." And people laugh, but I've been saying this for years. And then when I talk about these challenges, and this episode will probably be really difficult because my son will be like, "Who you telling my business?" I'm like, "Sir, you know whose business your business is? Mine.
Yeah, that's right.
Your business is my business. And I'm sorry you feel like this, but I live my life out in the open, and I am not going to allow myself to be shamed and embarrassed into silence, because I think the silence is what kills and what breeds the shame, because there's going to be that tumor that was growing somewhere down there, on your neck, in the belly or whatever. I mean, clearly there's more medical stuff to it. But in terms of emotion, those things we stuff down and don't talk about it, and totally different but relevant, victims of, I'm thinking of my daughter and sexual violence and how it was a generational thing in her father's family. And when I talked about it and people were like, "Oh, don't tell the child's business." I'm trying to make sure that people can talk about this. So whether it's the shame of sexual violence or the shame of alcohol abuse, all of it, like we need to talk about it. We need to,
Yeah.
you know,
And it's not gossip.
no,
Like in our community, it's it's the bochinche, it's the gossip, but it's not coming from that place. It's coming from a place of love. It's coming from a place of concern. Because guess what? Guess what I started doing after Dasan transitioned? I started turning my phone off. Before then, the ringer was on. It was right next to my ear, and I was anticipating that phone call. That phone call that I received on June 3rd, 2021 at 10:30 p.m., that's the call that I have been expecting for years and years and years. And as soon as my boy flatlined and he went off into the next realm, into the realm of peace, into the realm of love, my phone was off.
wow.
And I slept.
Ooh,
Right.
child.
That's the relief that we're talking about, right? And
Yes.
honoring that and owning that's okay. And another thing I found too, amongst recovery populations, right? You can share that feeling even before that happens. Like, I'm nervous that they're going to pass away. And there's some part of me that's like, just do it already. Right. And you can say that, and other recovering people will be like, totally. I get that. When you're around non-recovering people or people who haven't experienced, they'll say, "Don't say that. Oh my God, don't wish that. How could you ever say that or put that out into the universe?" Right? It's like, so now I'm not even allowed to express how exhausted, how tiring this is. I can't even speak my truth, which is also part of growing up in codependence, right? We don't talk, we don't trust, and we don't feel, right? And part of NA, they have glow in the dark key tags, right? For some of the sobriety anniversaries. And it says, you glow in the dark so we don't have to, right? When they're smoking crack or doing whatever they're doing in the dark of night, right? But not in the light of day, clearly, right? We're recovering out loud so those other people don't have to suffer in silence anymore. That's literally
Come
the whole
on,
entire
we are recovering out
Yeah,
loud.
exactly.
And so you know what, Dionne, I want to honor you for saying that, for being vulnerable enough to know that you might get some backlash from this, from your loved ones, from your beloveds, but this is your truth, which is what I said at the very beginning. These stories that I'm sharing are mine. They might involve other people, but this is what I'm living through. And so, Jill, thank you for those affirmations, because mothers like us, family members like us, we need those affirmations to understand and to know and to truly feel confident in moving forward and sharing this and creating this community and being vulnerable and being open-hearted, because holding it in is death.
Yeah.
Period. Period.
And you know, I want to take a second. 5 seconds, 3 seconds, however many seconds it takes. I want to inhale. I want to take another breath break, because this is a lot. And I truly want to be mindful of the folks, you know, that are tuned in. I want us to take a breath in with grace, and I want us to exhale and let go of that guilt. Can we do that exercise together?
Absolutely.
Okay, let's take a deep breath in, full of grace. Now exhale all of the guilt. And let it go. And let it go. Because I want to move on. I mean, there's so much to cover here. I want to move on to grief as a gateway to addiction.
And we'll be right back.
Welcome to Merrick Studios, where stories take the mic and culture comes alive.
We're not just a network, we're family, bringing you smart, soulful, unfiltered conversations.
And this season, we're bringing the heat with our biggest lineup yet. Whatever you're into, music, sports, business, we got you covered.
Merrick Studios, where the conversation starts and keeps going.
Check out our full lineup, including Unglossy with Bun B, Jeffrey Sledge, and myself, Tom Frank. Now streaming at wearemerrickstudios.com.
Master the art of lyricism with Pendulum Mink, the first school for rap. Learn elite techniques through immersive lessons, real-world exercises, and guidance from hip-hop icons. This is where MCs sharpen their skills and glow boldly on the mic. Ready to level up? Visit pendulummink.com and start your journey today.
And now, back to the show.
So far, we've talked about addiction itself and the whole process, dying from complications of addiction or being addicted, and what that grief process, you know, watching someone be having a substance abuse. Jill, many studies show that people are more vulnerable to addiction after a major loss. Can you help us understand how grief affects the brain and the body in a way that increases that risk?
Yeah, so we talk a lot about the inner drugstore in ACA and in recovery programs, right? So our shelves are stocked, right, with shame and guilt and blame and all these things. And then addiction hits us. It's almost like a car driving through a CVS, if you will, right? And all the prescriptions fall off the shelves, right? So everything falls off the shelves. So now we got a big mess inside, right? We got the cortisol, we have the adrenaline, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, all the things, right? They're all swirling around, swimming inside of us, right? And we're trying to make sense of what happened to us. We're trying to make sense of what happened to our loved one, right? Maybe we're on FMLA, or we're not working as much, or we're not in our hobbies. And maybe the first month has passed, so people aren't checking as much, right? The first couple weeks, people are with the cards and the candies and the casseroles, the 3 C's, right? There's another 3 C's we got there. Candy, cards, and casseroles, and consolations, right? Platitudes have passed, right? And now, you know, as Glennon Doyle says, right, grief is like a lonely basement guest bedroom. We're just like sitting alone by ourselves, right? And alcohol and drugs, it's like they tuck you in at night, and they're like a warm blanket to wear, right? It numbs the pain, and it makes it easier. It makes time pass. I mean, I've had friends and family members who had children pass away from addiction, and they didn't relapse for like a year. They'd been in recovery, and then they relapsed a year later, because all of a sudden it hits them that no one really cares except for your close people who maybe you remind and you check in with, right? So not only does it affect our brain in that we're, our brain can go offline completely, right? The prefrontal cortex, the amygdala can be completely offline and we're just living in survival and doing our best to make it through, right? But also physically, we feel like we have this big cement coat on, right?
Mm.
Maybe you get 3 days of bereavement, unless you take FMLA. So you're at
Right.
work, a fractured version of yourself, and everyone's like, "Hey, how you doing?" And you're like, "Get me out of here." Right? So people using, people start working,
I'm
people
gonna
start
tell
acting
you, Jill,
out.
because I'm gonna tell you, Jill, because I've said this to Evie before. When I was at work and shit was real, like, how you doing? I'm dying with a smile on my face, and I'm sure there are people at Morgan Stanley that don't ask anybody how they're doing anything because I
Yeah.
was like, I'm dying with a smile on my face. How are you doing? I'm dying with a smile on my face. And then,
Yeah.
they don't even hear you, right? How you doing? I'm
Yeah.
dying with a smile on my face. Okay, good. They're already down the hall. It was like, did you
Did
hear
you
what
just say that? Did she just say, did you hear her? Did you hear what she
Yeah.
just said?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm dying with a smile on my
Clutching
face.
their
That's how
pearls
I'm
like,
feeling.
how could she say that?
Yeah. I used to say hanging in there and people would be like, "Wow, when you say hanging in there, it sounds like you're that cat hanging on to the branch by a fingernail." And I said, "Yeah, that sounds about right." Right? Like,
That
yeah, how are you
part.
doing, bad? Right? We can't really say how we feel. And if we can't show up as our authentic self and how we feel, that's when we're vulnerable and we're susceptible. And we start using drugs, we start using alcohol, we start using whatever to be able to show up in an environment, right? Because it's a systemic problem, right? Our society is an addict, right? We got to show up at work 3 or 4 days after a cataclysmic loss. So here we are showing up, have to pretend like nothing's wrong. And
Hmm.
how do we do that?
Hmm. Well, and even when you talk about some of the reasons, and thankfully, I mean, that wasn't my story in terms of reaching for substances, but I will tell you what one of my substances, I will hit a refrigerator like it's my job.
Yeah.
I will hit,
Mhm. Mhm.
I will hit a loaf
Yes.
of bread. I will hit, like,
Yeah.
now I'm gluten free, but
Yeah.
I mean, food. If I'm good,
I mean,
yeah.
I got the double chin to show it. I promise you, yes.
So Evie and I have our own addictions that are legal as well.
Woo.
But
Don't put a candy bar in front of me, baby, because it's gone.
that's right. And I want to,
Yeah.
I mean, Evie and I out ourselves in this process because we want other people that are listening. We're inviting you into our family, into our lives, and let you see
Mhm.
yourself in Evie, in me, in our stories, and see that pattern. And I'm like, if you're in this process of numbing and food doesn't give you the same numbing, but there's a food coma. So there's
Totally.
a
Yeah.
numbing, right? So the numbing, the escaping, the overworking. Like, somebody drove me home last night from teaching yoga, and there's some things going on in my life. There's some things Evie knows about. And she was like, I don't know how you do it. You're always so busy. And I was like, that would be avoidance.
Yeah.
That,
Yeah.
that would be avoidance.
That's right.
I'm numbing. Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
numbing.
I'm numbing.
Yeah, I'm
Porn.
numbing.
I mean, you
Well,
pleasures, sex,
everything.
over sex addictions or what. I mean, it runs the gamut. It's not just substance abuse,
That's
right?
right.
Like
Right.
we
That's right.
find many, many different ways
Mhm.
of disconnecting and numbing ourselves and just stepping away from the pain. I
Yeah.
often, as a grief coach, and I'm sure Dionne, you hear the same thing, and I'm sure as a therapist, Jill, you hear this, where they're like, I just want it to be gone. I just don't want to feel this anymore. So,
Yeah.
with someone going through that process, Jill, what are some healthier ways to meet that pain? How do we meet that pain without falling into a new cycle of loss?
Yeah. So we have to be willing to meet the pain. That's a
Mm,
big one, right?
mm.
Yeah,
So,
that
I mean,
part.
I've heard myself say it. I've seen myself do it, and I've heard myself say it to many people, right? And hear other people say it too, right? It's that we run as hard as we can for as long as we can when we first have a loss, whether it's addiction related or any kind. We're just running. We're doing our best to outrun this wave that's about to swallow us whole, right? And that's fine for the first couple months, right? We're just trying to stay alive. After that point, right, then we have to be able to learn how to hold love and loss in our body in the
Mm,
same way,
mm.
right? Grief doesn't go away. It will
Wait,
never
let's
go away.
pause that. Pause that. You're gonna have to say that again. We need to
She's
learn.
dropping bars.
She just be like,
You understand? No, listen, when I'm in session with Jill, I have the notepad there. I'll be like, yo, can you repeat that? I write it down verbatim. Like, no, please, Jill, repeat that.
we have
We
to
have
hold love and loss.
Yeah, we have to be able to hold love and loss together. Love and loss in the same body, right? And I don't know if you guys ever did sand art when you were a kid, right? Like the layers of the sand, the onion, right? We have to be able to hold them like that. We don't put all the layers and then shake it up. We put all the layers and then we look at the different layers of silt and sand and colors and all that sort of stuff. And we learn how, as David Kessler says, how to make meaning from this loss, right? Not silver lining it, not like, I'm glad they passed because then I'm horrifically devastated and will never be grateful for that. And I'm also grateful for what I've learned as a result of, right? So the wellness practices as a practice, which is really important practice, right? It's an action word, a verb, right? It's not something that it's not a noun. It's a verb. I'm practicing, right? I'm journaling, I'm meditating, doing a podcast, communicating with people, right? Gym, community, all these sorts of things, speaking our truth, living in our truth, right? And being willing to have the bad days and being willing to have the less heavy days, right? Honor the whole process, as all of this is part of the healing and the grieving, right?
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think
And that was
one
it.
one last piece I
Oh, go
just
ahead.
wanted to say is the letting go of the why too, I think, is a big one. I think we get caught in the why, which is what keeps us in the circle of overworking and numbing. And if we just release the why, just release, like, that's so easy. If we are willing to work on releasing the why every day by day, one baby step at a time, that helps tremendously
Yeah.
in terms of.
I'll give a quick tool that worked for me
Mm-hmm.
with the why. And that was, I truly resolved myself to step into my faith. And it could be whatever
Yeah.
faith you want to have faith in. Whatever it is that you want to have faith in. I put my faith in God, and I truly believed that this was life playing itself out as it was supposed to be played out as prescribed by God. And I refused. I put it in my head. I refused to ask why. I refused to allow myself to go into that rabbit hole of why. And and my anchor was faith. That's how I did it.
I love that. And I already mentioned what my not so great coping behaviors are with the busyness and overgiving. My niece, I'm blessed that my niece lives with me right now. And even that, like, somebody needs a place to stay. It's like, absolutely. My house is always the place to stay. There are people I forget. Like, there's just always somebody here. Those of you listening, don't ask to stay at my house. The door is closed. I'm just saying. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
But there were always people staying here.
Boundaries.
There's a box. But the scrolling, right? We have internet 24/7. So the scrolling, the overgiving, the busyness. So I just want to tell people, Evie and I are you. We've been you. I'm not going to throw Jill in there, but everybody that you know, when you're on the train, on the bus, in your car, and you pass somebody at a red light and you see that other human, they're going through some aspect of what you're going through. I don't care if you're black, red, green, purple, or in between, male, female, non-binary. We are in this experience of what Jill said, just trying to stay alive and finding our ways to do it. And the more we can embrace love and compassion to look at what it is and to acknowledge that my grief don't look like Jill's grief, don't look like Evie's grief, don't look like Sule's grief, but we are all, every last human on the planet is grieving something. I told you in the previous episode, Uncle Al at 97 could tell me the story of being 5 years old and they took his stroller away and they made him walk. He grieving that stroller. It's like, what do you mean? If you're nursed a child, I nursed my children. When you stop nursing, that baby can't spell grief, can't say grief, but there's a loss. It starts early, and we only start talking about it when a human dies. But it starts way before that, because I know, and I don't know what it was for you, Evie. I know how hard my children fought to continue to nurse. And it's like, yeah, this, we got to stop this. So I think I just bringing it to that point because I want to emphasize in this particular podcast, while linking and talking about addiction and substance use, that we need to name our grief early, that we don't need to hide it. One of my clients, I was talking to her and I said, because grievers, and she giggled. And I was like, what did I say? And she goes, I said, that's what we are. We are grievers. We are grievers. We are actively grieving. So we need to name it early. We need to not hide it, not shame it, so it doesn't become another wound. I can't think of the Rumi quote, but the wound is where the light enters. I think that's it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But with that,
Bill knows all the quotes, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm going to
listen,
pass
I just
it
wanted
to
to
you,
say
Evie,
too, when
so
you
we can
said you
wrap
didn't
up.
want to group me in there, I totally identify. And when you guys said Jill specializes in anxiety and addiction, I was like, yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah. Yes, I do.
Yes, I know.
Literally,
Yes, I know.
not just professionally, literally do specialize in this. Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Wow. Every layer of this conversation reminds me that grief doesn't disappear. To your point, we should name it. It transforms us in every way, from every turn. When addiction is part of that story, we have to let love and truth exist side by side. That means forgiving what we don't know, releasing what we can't control, and giving ourselves permission to feel every single day.
Woo!
Every step takes us closer, brings us closer to healing.
Aché, Aché, Aché. All right, wherever you are, fam, this was a action-packed, emotionally evolved experience for
right.
those of us that you're listening to, and I'm sure for you at home, in your car, wherever you are. So wherever you are right now, please take another deep breath with us. We don't often do this much breathing, but we haven't unpacked this much in a while. So inhale what is yours, pull it in, the love, light, the peace, the harmony, and exhale what no longer serves you, guilt, shame, pain, judgment. Inhaling what is yours, the light, the good memories. May the memories, the good ones, be a blessing, and release what is not yours with every exhale. I invite you to inhale to inspire and exhale to release.
So beautiful. Dionne, you're
Yeah.
such a guru with the breath work and with the intentions. Jill, we do a segment at the end of every single episode where we breathe Aché, life force, into our beloveds that have transitioned and passed on. The belief is that when we say their names, we keep their memories alive and we breathe Aché into them. Before we get to that part of the segment and we close it up, do you have any parting words for us? And thank you so much for being our guest today.
Yeah, I really appreciate being here. I could feel the vulnerability and feel the authenticity in both of you guys, which I really appreciated, which helped me to show up fully as well, right? We can all have a grief conversation, but we can't always have a grief conversation, right? And I really appreciate that. And yeah, I just want to say to move with the grief, right? Not fighting the grief so much. If I were to do one last analogy, right? It's like grief is like a backpack, right? We just sort of learn how to carry the rocks in it, right? It's always heavy, but we learn how to not, let it fall this way or let us fall this way, right? And how to kind of carry it with 2 feet on the ground. And also just always believing that our grief journey is sacred, right? It's not something to hide. It's not something to be embarrassed about, right? Grief is the representation that we once had something extremely beautiful in our life that is not here anymore. And it's the price of loving, right? So just remembering that grief is a sacred honor.
Grief is a sacred honor. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jill. I'm coming here today, and with my Aché, I'm going to call in Gloria Ann Bird, who I celebrated her today, and she will be interred and laid to rest physically. Her interment is tomorrow. And also calling in Kristen Schultz. They're both yoga family to me, both gone too soon. And Kristen's going home is coming up as well. So I'm calling them in for my Aché, as Seaway is always on my tongue and deeply loved and remembered. Who's your Aché, Yvette?
um, I want to Aché my uncle, Wilfredo Antonio Canino Sr., my favorite uncle. um, he had a drinking problem. He was a Vietnam veteran and came back very changed, like many Vietnam veterans did. His happy place was the cemetery, which is where he worked, and so he carried the power of Oya with him as he did his work in the cemetery. And I also want to bring in Aché to his son, my cousin, Wilfredo Antonio Canino Jr.,
Hmm.
who passed away from an overdose of heroin. Very troubled, just a legacy life of substance abuse and pain. So I would love to call them in. And then finally, Dasan, who is I say his name every single day, but sharing his name and his story today.
I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you.
I hope that this helps one person, 5 people, 10 people, 1,000 people. I hope that you join our community and you understand that grieving in community makes it a lot easier. We're
Ashe.
here and our hearts are open.
Mm-hmm.
Ashe,
Mm-hmm.
Ashe.
Ashe. Ashe.
Jill,
Yeah,
would
and
you
I
like
didn't
to
call your
join us?
name. Yeah, I was gonna say if you have a
Yes.
name. I mentioned
Yeah.
my uncle and Georgia and all those people. So going back, George Hicks, my father, George Marquez, my son's father, Jorge Luis David Alviso Marquez, my son's grandfather, all of those that chose, or alcohol chose them and kept them. But we'll close it out with you, Jill.
Yeah, thank you so much for including me in that. It's such a vulnerable exercise. I don't know that I've ever done that. But yeah, I will definitely Ashe my mom, Mary Mackey. She passed away 5 years ago from the disease, 5.5 years ago. And my dog Bluebell and my grandfather Bernie, they did not pass away from addiction, but my inner kids wanted me to say them as well.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
I'm just going to honor that and say them aloud as well.
I like to always honor those inner kids, unless they want you to have the extra drink. But yes, those inner children, yes, we bring them forward.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm giving you all the biggest hug. My loving
guys.
I love you. All right. We'll see you next time.
See you next time, guys.
We'd love for you to join the conversation with us on Instagram at 2, that's the number 2, mothers, 1, the number 1, Aché Pod. And produced and distributed by Merrick Studios.
Until next time, may love carry you through.